Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you all are having a great day. And as we get things kicked off here with the program, you had hopefully a warm and dry weekend. I know that the hurricane, unfortunately had to pass over Florida, but I have a lot of friends and family in Florida, and they seem to be doing okay. I hope all of yours are as well. So for the program, though, we have a very awesome guest today, and it's going to be, you might not have heard about them, but they're doing a lot of great stuff in terms of big data, artificial intelligence, something that, we are seeing more and more of in, not just high-tech companies in certain fields, but really across all fields. And, joining us is Signafire. It's going to be a lot of fun as we talk to them about what they do, how they do it, and how they can maybe even help businesses that you might know. So, but before we get to that, a few things, including computeramerica.com. That has everything from the audio, the video, the whatever you want over at computeramerica.com. And you can find it in one place, one-stop shop. And also, while you're there, be sure to check out the contest sponsored by Logitech. They give away a prize every single Friday to one of our listeners. And hey, we could be reading your name live on the air this Friday. All you have to do is go over there and enter. There's 9 different ways. So, whatever you're comfortable with. The last thing is, of course, the live video stream where you can watch Computer America and not just listen. That's right. So, it's not mandatory. Of course, we're still a radio show. But if you want to, follow along, check out the guest website, things like that, well, we got you covered. So, with all of that being said, let me introduce them once again. So, joining us today is, again, Signafire, and you can find them, signafire.com, and Mr. Steve Davis, who is the co-founder and chief technology officer for Signafire. Steve, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Ben. Yeah, good to be here.
And happy to have you here as we get things kicked off. So obviously, a lot going on in the news, and it seems like almost every other day we are talking about artificial intelligence and what it means for, and it's not just what companies are doing with it, but how companies are going to be impacting workers' lives, consumers' lives, things like that. And, there seems to be an infinite number of ways that you can, parlay big data, artificial intelligence, things like that into, just kind of end results for customers and companies, what have you. So let's start breaking down these topics, step by step, and then we'll talk about how Signafire, kind of rolls into all of this. So I guess the first one should be, big data. Could you describe big data and what that really means? Is it really just, like a lot of data or what have you? Explain big data and, maybe some ways that a lot of companies are maybe missing the boat on data in general.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so big data, the term big data has been around really not that long in the grand scheme of things, but that doesn't mean that data hasn't existed for a long time. I think a lot of us, a lot of my colleagues have worked with big data going back many years before the term big data was kind of coined, and people define big data in different ways. I think the most common way that people talk about it is the 3 V's, and sometimes you hear the 4 V's: volume, velocity, and veracity, which is sort of the uncertainty involved in data. And sometimes that 4th V is just the variety of data that we're looking at these days. And I think that's a valuable way to describe all of the challenges surrounding big data, but really I think a lot of the focus has been on how do you handle the massive volumes of data, and how do you handle the speed at which you're pulling in data? But I think people haven't really thought through enough about how they're going to use the data, about taking a more results-oriented approach and figuring out, what kind of insights are we really trying to derive, rather than just let's throw it all together and see what we can make of it.
Yeah, and I recall it's maybe not the best use of big data, but I recall the NSA, the National Surveillance Agency, whatever, and when they were found with, I think it was like tens or hundreds of terabytes worth of data, worth of metadata for cell phone calls and people's people's communications. And I think it's exactly what you're kind of pointing to, where they were able to suck up all this data. They were able to, collect metadata, collect contacts and things like that. But then, there's an article, a few months later after we heard about the NSA, about how they were literally crippled with, the amount of data, and they were just so unprepared on how to actually get anything useful, national security wise or otherwise, out of the mountains of data. It's not really feasible to sit people down at a monitor and say, all right, pull something useful out of here. It's just too much.
Yeah. That's exactly right, and we tell our customers this all the time. Businesses have focused, and they put a lot of resources. There's been a lot of investment internally in companies and just among players in the industry to be able to handle the data. But really, if you're not doing it in a smart way, you're not going to get value out of it. And so a lot of companies kind of make the mistake of thinking that if they pull in their customer support records and their support emails and their support telephone calls, and they put it all in one place, then they'll just magically get some value out of it. And what we teach our customers is it's not about co-location. It's really about integration. And their data warehouses have been around for a long time, data lakes. There's still a lot of movement towards those types of things. But there has to be more investment in the industry to figure out, okay, let's assume that you've got it all in one place. What does that really mean, and how does that impact your bottom line? What does that mean for optimizing your risk, or adjusting your prices for customers, or for optimizing the experience that your customers are having? I'm not sure that people have really thought through that kind of thing, and that's been a big driver for us as a company, is to help companies not only get a handle on it and get the foundation to manage big data, but also really derive business value from it.
So yeah, and let's talk about that. So if you could give us some use cases for maybe Signafire, as in what services are really, are you really attracting? Like, are you you kind of mentioned customer service, information. Are you doing like call centers and helping with that kind of thing, or like who is using Signafire, and what industries does data, or what industries do you really see data starting to play a big role in collecting?
Yeah, so it's really you could name just about any industry, and there's an application for sort of the big data analysis, and it's because there's always some component of a task that is possible for a lot of people to look at and handle manually, but after we've gotten through the age of globalization, we're just looking at so many different perspectives and so many different sources of information that we're trying to correlate. So what we really do is we help customers in a number of industries. Now I'll talk through some of those industries, but
Sure.
We really help them fuse the data to understand what's common among these various data sets. What are the types of things that we want to automatically analyze, so that you don't have to have a million people looking at the data and reading it and manually tagging things that are important. We automate those types of things, and tools for analysts to annotate and collaborate and maintain the knowledge that they gain throughout that process, so that every time you go back and you look at a new problem, you're not starting from scratch every time. And that concept, everything that I just described there, applies to so many different industries. We've had a lot of success in the automotive industry in particular, helping large automotive companies identify emerging safety issues for their vehicles so that they know when to recall a part and how to recall things sooner before parts get too far down the vehicle lifetime, which is a really important thing for us, and I think it hits close to home for a lot of my colleagues because it's really about safety and it's about saving lives. But it's not limited to that application. We've done a lot of work for the video game industry, integrating customer support channels. So anytime you have a game where you have an in-game support channel where you're talking to a game administrator or you're calling a support line or you're even chatting in a message forum, we've helped companies bring all of that together in one place and understand when things are going wrong in the game. Because if you've got people at a call center, each individual person might be able to identify a pattern that they're seeing on the phone, but unless you're able to take all of those call center people and all of the other data sources and fuse those all together to understand what the real trends are, you're not really getting the full picture.
So is this what you mean by when you say, making data sets smarter? Because obviously, let's take your example of, game administrators. Let's face it, people are people, and 1,000 different people could come up for 1,000 different reasons of why something might be happening. And, if you're able to, just kind of put in the proper data, weed out the data that's superfluous. Is this what you mean by, smarter data sets? And, does Signafire kind of, try to, because I can assume that any results that you get from the data can only be as good as what you feed into it. So.
Yeah, that's true. So we always have a close relationship with our customers, and we iterate with them to help combine the best of our technology and the best of their domain knowledge to understand what kinds of problems they're really trying to solve. And the software that we provide is built to be able to scale to their problem, but also the capability to be tailored specifically for their problem, so that whether we're talking about video game problems or vehicle recalls, those are two very different things, and the types of text that are important in those things are vastly different. But the way that our software iterates and works with the way that we work with analysts to find out what's really important is our way of optimizing and tuning the system so that they can really do exactly what you said, weed out the superfluous information and find those valuable nuggets.
Right. So, and of course, all of this, you mentioned that, it's not like Signafire is employing, millions of people to do all this. I believe this is a good way to kind of segue into our next topic, which is, of course, artificial intelligence. It's something that, if you've been listening to Computer America for a while, AI, it seemed like around 2013, 2014, maybe even 2015, we just started hearing about AI, kind of casually from the likes of Facebook and what have you. And then all of a sudden now everyone kind of, just kind of associates any kind of industry has artificial intelligence in it. And, I think on the consumer level, people are still thinking Terminator. People are still thinking science fiction, future technology, something that's not really in the here and now, but that's exactly what artificial intelligence is. It's in practical uses right now. So why don't you, as someone who deals with this, why don't you explain what artificial intelligence kind of means in a business application?
Yeah, that's a great question. The topic of artificial intelligence is always misused in a lot of ways. And I think if you talk to 10 different people, you'll probably get 10 different definitions of what artificial intelligence really is. I mean, it's such a wide spectrum. You could go back hundreds of years to when people were creating mechanical Turks, which were the fake robots with a person inside that were trying to fool people into thinking that they were a mechanical device that they were interacting with. And then much more recently, obviously, I think the best example is ELIZA, the computer program that MIT created in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
It was a chatbot, and they programmed it to be a psychotherapist. And what would happen is people would share their feelings and get sort of this virtual therapist. And after a while, they wouldn't realize that they're talking to a machine anymore. And so I think that's a more modern definition of artificial intelligence. And of course, there's in recent years, obviously, the Internet of Things with Google Home and Amazon Echo and soon Apple's HomePod. Those types of things are starting to affect our daily lives more and more. It's still a little bit in the early adopter phase right now, but I think we'll see those types of things become more and more mainstream. I think to me, AI is really just about automation of tasks that are traditionally human-oriented. So, and that's a wide spectrum, right? That is asking Alexa or Siri for information that you could dig up yourself, but somebody's doing that for you, or somebody's doing that for you. An
Right.
AI application is kind of automating that task for you. Or in our world, at Signafire, it's really about automating finding those critical nuggets of information that we eventually bubble up to human analysts for human analysts to make decisions on. So we always advocate a human in the loop. AI isn't to the point where we're going to make real business decisions without evidence, without due diligence, without humans checking the boxes.
Right.
But it's kind of like the million monkeys.
Yeah, in a room with a typewriter, and eventually they'll type Shakespeare, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean that's true. There's nothing wrong with that. You could apply that same idea to a lot of big data problems. You could just add a million analysts to dig through information every day. But really that's not cost effective, and nobody really wants to do that, right? So that's where AI comes into play for us is really reading the text from massive amounts of information and helping bubble up to the top what's the most important stuff to look at.
Right. And so I guess that brings us to, the fact that, again, about, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, you heard it rarely, or, it was completely misunderstood. And nowadays it seemed like just the other day, I was talking to someone, and they were like in a pretty low tech field. And they were like, "Oh yeah, we use AI to determine the best place to put your septic tank or something." And it was something, just kind
Right.
of like something kind of off about it. And so I guess my question is, in a lot of applications, I'm sure, obviously for Signafire, this is what you do, and it makes sense. But to a lot of industries, is AI just a buzzword, or or is it something that people should really say, this is something that's coming, and the early adopters of AI are going to be better off than those who kind of wait and see?
That's a great question. I think it's a little bit of both. I think a lot of people misappropriate the term AI. I think a lot of companies use AI inappropriately in marketing, and I think it's important for companies like our company to help educate our customers on what artificial intelligence really means, what the state of it is today, what kinds of practical value we can add today, and with a view towards the future of understanding that AI is really this big umbrella that includes all kinds of things from the Internet of Things that we see in our homes with Amazon Echo to Terminator, right?
Yeah.
So with a view towards the future, but really understanding what it practically means today and how it can help companies, how it can affect the bottom line, really.
Just to assuage everyone's fears, I don't believe I've ever heard of an instance where AI in the context that we're talking about has ever, wanted things for itself. It's never become sentient, never become selfish. It's just AI.
Right.
It's just, like you said, a tool to, to analyze data. And so, with that being said, though, you do make a good point. Internet of Things, that's another buzzword, but it's certainly coming on very rapidly with, like you said, smart speakers, and heck, we all have cell phones, we all have computers, we all have, maybe even connected cars or thermostats, refrigerators. It's, the Internet of Things, I would kind of say, is here, for the most part, if not as pervasive as it's going to get. So my point is with all of these data points that are going to be coming, is AI going to get better with all these extra data points, or do you think AI is kind of, already has the information and more data points isn't really going to kind of affect the AI of the future?
That's a really good question. Well, I think we're starting to see a lot of innovation in that home IoT space, and I think as we move from early adopters to more mainstream users, I think the additional data that will become available, I think that will be valuable. But I think we're going to learn a lot more about end results and about what people really want. And for example, Internet of Things, I don't know, maybe people don't need to ask Siri what the weather is every hour of the day. So I think we'll adjust the way that we want to interact with that type of technology over time. But what I'd like to see personally is a more generalized application of AI algorithms without the crutch of training data. So
and I mean, just real quick, we kind of we just had a story about 3 or 4 days ago. It was, I think MIT was doing it, where, and please feel free to correct me on any part of this, but it was something along the lines of, you have to train an artificial intelligence. That's one of the big limiters, is that you start out with essentially a clean slate and you feed it massive amounts of data, and it doesn't really iterate upon itself. Like it doesn't learn. So like you can't take one that was maybe, for analyzing, car part recalls and say, all right, now you're doing game customer support, and it can kind of, learn some things and unlearn other things. Like it's very much, they're very kind of limited in scope. It's very specific. So, I mean, is that kind of what you're getting
absolutely.
at?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, again, AI is such a big umbrella term that it means a lot of things. But generally, when people are talking about it, they're talking about training statistical models on some subset of data, and a lot of times the data that they're using to train it on are scientific journal articles, or they're training it on Twitter data, and those are two very different things. Just as
because one of those kind of ends up with a racist robot. Like
right.
Not the best thing.
Yeah, so I think at Signafire we try to educate our customers that it's really about a balance of practicality versus generalization of automating everything, right? And when we apply text mining, text analysis algorithms, we look for the approaches that will provide the best value for the customers. And that doesn't always mean relying on a bunch of training data. Sometimes that relies on coming up with not just ways to a bag of words approach where we're pulling out words and phrases of interest, but more complex parsing rules to say, if I ever see a mechanic mention an airbag, and they follow that up with words to the effect of a non-deployment, and that means to me that an airbag didn't go off when it should have, and that's something that I need to be concerned about. And you don't necessarily need a ton of training data for that. In reality, what the best approach is to combine those those two approaches to take trained models for text classification and this more literal human knowledge-oriented path, and combine those into a better approach. But you can get a lot of value if you just understand when my customers are going to talk about their engines, is it the engine that I care about, or is it the fire that happens when something goes wrong with the engine? And how do I understand when an engine is catching fire in text?
Yeah, and and I think something that you really highlighted there that kind of clicked in my mind is that when we talk about big data and you talk about these data collection firms, I mean it's in a lot of ways it's off-putting, I think, to a lot of people because they think companies are out there, they're trying to collect everything I say, do, and they're trying to get my personal information and they're trying to feed it into I don't know, giant machine, the system, whatever you want to call it. But a lot of what you just described was yeah, they're collecting your data, but it's collecting your tweets. It's collecting things that you say, things that you purposely put out there. It's not like you're, at Signafire or really anyone else is really trying to find out your mother's maiden name and, find out what your face looks like and, these kinds of things. Like you're only trying if you could try to wrap this into a question for your customers. I mean, the data that they collect, it's not just about making every one of your customers fill out a 100 question questionnaire. Your customers can collect that kind of data without being intrusive to their customers, right? It's not off-putting to use your services.
Oh, absolutely. And to be honest, a lot of the big data analysis that we see today are internal to companies and internal to their own owned data sets. And most of the time, the analysis is on anonymized data anyway. There's a lot of data scientists involved in the process, and there's a lot of things that are really valuable for the customers, the end users of companies, that no one should really be afraid of.
Yeah. Say no one should be afraid of it, but it's fear based out of ignorance. I really do feel like, and I'm sure you've met people in your life. I know I have family that is afraid to put anything online or say anything because they're afraid that, hey, they're going to be put into a system and ever since Equifax happened, I think that's kind of justified. But
I think that's probably a larger concern.
Right, absolutely. And Steve, I'm going to say this, that we're coming up. We have like 2 more minutes left, and then we're going to go to a break. Would you mind staying over so we can
Oh, sure, yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So, but in these last couple minutes, though, if we can, kind of switch over to, using all this, we talked about data, we talked about AI. Now it's time to put it into practice as a force for good, a force for innovation, a force for whatever you want to call it. Where do you see this kind of, maybe having a large impact very, very early? Because, like you said, you've been trying it in different fields. Do you see anywhere where it's just going to kind of, take it by storm?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think obviously the automotive industry is a big example there for this ultimately optimizing the ways that they do analysis to find emerging safety issues before they become more prevalent problems in the real world. I think we've done a lot of work with the insurance industry, and I think that's the next industry that will disrupt significantly is insurance, and it's not necessarily about individual homeowners insurance. It's really about the insurance that large companies work with on a day-to-day basis for sort of massive logistics operations throughout the world, down to individual factory insurance.
Now, when you say
companies.
Yeah, and obviously when you say insurance, and we're gonna have to go to break, but when you say insurance, when you come back, I kind of want to know if you mean, kind of helping them avoid paying out or helping them give them the proper insurance for what they're doing. So, everyone, music means we're gonna take a break. We'll be right back with Signafire, Mr. Steve Davis. He is the co-founder and chief technology officer for Signafire. So, everyone, Computer America, Of course, we'll be right back, and later on in the program, we'll be doing computer and technology news. Everyone, we'll be right back right after this.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
Welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 31 minutes past the hour as we continue on here with Steve Davis, co-founder and chief technology officer of Signafire. And Steve, again, I apologize, but to kind of go back to the question, it was the idea that, using artificial intelligence, using this data, I guess my question really boiled down to, when you say disruptive technology and, disruptive for the insurance, field, is it a good disruptive or is it a bad disruptive? Is this going to help insurance companies kind of provide a better service, or is this kind of going to make them obsolete?
Oh, no. I think it's only going to help insurance companies perform better and be able to provide more options for their customers as well. There's a lot of interesting innovation in the insurance company that's just starting, that I think we're seeing more and more of lately. There's a company called Lemonade that has a totally different business model from the traditional insurance agencies. But that's kind of an innovation in business model.
Mm-hmm.
If you check out Lemonade, they have an interesting approach to pricing where they charge you a flat fee, and then they give you whatever is left over from that flat fee at the end of the year that you didn't use in terms of claims. It's kind of an interesting business model, probably worth looking into. But I think in terms of really disrupting the entire industry with big data analytics, data fusion, content analytics, we're really talking about helping insurance companies model their risk more appropriately. And that means not just relying on old school actuarial tables where if you're insuring a new McDonald's somewhere in the country, you just look at the last McDonald's that you insured, and you insured at the same level, same premium. That's not necessarily how you should price your risk. There's a lot of factors that should go into that kind of analysis that don't necessarily make it there, because it's an industry that's really based on a lot of human knowledge, a lot of knowledge passed down from individual to individual. And so I think by being able to take advantage of histories of claims, these massive amounts of claim histories, and instead of just processing a claim and that information's done, I think if we look at claims in the aggregate, we can find patterns that help insurance companies price that risk better.
Yeah, and you could definitely, start to see the implications of that in things like the medical field, where, medical insurance, same way, insuring someone who, obviously low risk versus high risk versus, just kind of knowing what you're getting into. It's, it sounds very, kind of out there, but again, hey, this is what you do. This is what Signafire kind of does, and it's exciting. So, I mean, just personally for me to kind of answer the same question, it's, what have I kind of heard AI is going to kind of take over? And, as soon as they work out the kinks, I think self-driving cars are one of the biggest talked about topics, that we have here on the show. And the idea that AI is essentially going to be your new driver. Like, self-driving cars are a form of AI, correct?
Yeah, I mean, in the grand scope of what AI could mean, it's certainly one of the larger applications to automate what is traditionally a human task, uh, uh, taking readings of the environment and reacting.
Yeah, and of course doing it better, like you said. You could pay a million people to look at the same set of data, but a computer does it much more effectively and efficiently. So, like we've been talking about, this is not just across cars, this is not just across insurance, but really all industries in general. And let's talk about kind of the future of Signafire, of course. Like, are you, and again, I haven't really taken a measure of the field, but are companies such as Signify going to start popping up more often? Because you're kind of one of the first that we've had here on the show. Do you see firms such as yourself kind of popping up here and there, or is this going to kind of congeal into one company has the best AI to interpret all data, and it's and it's monopoly?
Well, I think traditionally it's really been the large integrators, the really big companies that everyone would recognize. But those companies haven't necessarily attacked the problem as well as they could have. So I think it's an industry that's ripe for new companies to come in and provide more innovative thinking and helping customers translate what big data really means to their industry. It's not to name any names, but if you see a commercial with an AI talking to Bob Dylan, it's not necessarily obvious how that translates to optimizing my insurance risk portfolio.
Yeah, and I know exactly the ad campaign you're talking about, and I think it's getting people associated with with AI, and uh, it's not really explaining the possibilities more than it's just kind of introducing, saying, "Hi, this is the thing." But you're right. It's may not be apparent that it's instantly,
Yeah.
going to change everything. So, and yeah, so let's talk about, we talk about industries that we think it's going to be, the most disruptive, the most innovative in. What about some of the unanticipated industries? Because
Mm.
it's hard being a company that doesn't see change coming on the horizon, and then 5 years later, you're kind of out of business because you didn't, you become the next I don't know, Borders or Sears or what have you, that just didn't see the trends and didn't see it kind of happening. So, do you see anywhere
Mm.
where it's kind
Mhm.
of, maybe gonna not, change quickly?
Yeah, I think a lot of industries are starting to pick up on it. Even the WalMarts and Starbucks of the world. I think any company that has a stake in customer support or any company uh, that relies on a reputation. I think those are all companies that probably deal in big data, and I think they're all companies that probably need this kind of analysis. I think one of the less obvious industries is probably online gaming, which is the numbers of online gambling sites throughout the world that have a lot of problems right now with fraud,
Mm-hmm.
and for companies to be able to analyze uh, information on those kinds of customers to identify possible fraudulent scenarios. I think that's probably one of the least obvious applications, but it's still exactly the same type of data fusion and content analytics that needs to be done for a lot of other industries.
Very, very interesting. And also, I see here, we got a little bio sent to us, when we were going to have you, and I see here that you also work with Blizzard Entertainment. They're personally my favorite. Been playing their games for 1994. I don't know how long that. 23 years. So no, obviously you guys work with a lot, and like you said, a lot of companies are going to start using services such as yours to, you know, uh, change everything from the way that they deal with their customers to risk management to just everything in between. So, yeah, and if people want to find out more about Signafire, I mean, about what you do, if they can, maybe use this in their own businesses, where can they go?
Yeah, I think go to signafire.com, signafire.com. There's a plenty of information there, some case studies and some additional resources to help get familiar with our technologies in particular, our data fusion pipelines and our data analytics tools to help analysts understand and collaborate, and also just some generally good information about big data and how we see big data and how we see it affecting industries.
Very, very cool. So, and everyone will have a link to that in the show notes, computeramerica.com. And with that, I'm going to have to say, Steve, thank you so much for joining us on Compute America. This was, I'll be honest, more interesting than I thought it was going to be. No offense to anyone, but when you start talking about big data, it can be very, kind of droning on kind of deal. But this was very, very interesting.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ben. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So everyone, once again, Steve Davis, co-founder and chief technology officer for Signafire. Steve, have a great one. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. All right, everyone. And there he goes. So Signafire, that was definitely glad that we had them on. Again, this is a technology that we hear about often here on the show, but mainly through headlines. Never someone who's actually in the field doing this for a living. So with that being said, why don't we do computer and technology news? Actually, let me check something real quick here. I should probably have checked this last time, but here we go. And so we'll do it tomorrow. So, okay, with that being said, computer and technology news brought to you by Computer America. All right, so I think a good place to start, and we have time for a number of them, but I really wanted to get this one in because tomorrow it's going to be old news, and we're going to be talking about the real things. But hey, until then, rumors are fun, and rumors are, of course, abound. Because if you haven't noticed, Apple will be taking the stage tomorrow and talking about their latest iPhone and presumably I think people are expecting the iPhone 7S, the iPhone 7S Plus, the two iterative generations that you could, kind of discern that, hey, that's what they've been doing for the past 5, 10, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But what you haven't been expecting is maybe the idea of the iPhone X. And as much as our correspondent, Mike Cermak, said that it wasn't going to happen, well, it's looking more and more like the iPhone X could be coming to market. And hey, it could be a real thing. So, but the big question, as this article points out, this coming from Harrods, and the idea, iPhone X, would you spend $1,000 on a phone? And they say Apple is indeed counting on it. That's right. So they're saying that the unveiling of a dramatically redesigned iPhone will likely be the marquee moment on Tuesday when Apple hosts its first product event at its new spaceship-like headquarters in Cupertino, California. Oh, so they finally finished the Apple compound. That's interesting because I remember when that thing went under construction, it was a giant UFO donut-looking thing and looked pretty cool. So can't wait to see that. But Apple is expected to sell its fanciest iPhone yet for $1,000. And again, we've had this conversation on the show before. It's probably worth it at this point for what we use our phones for. They're not just for making phone calls. They're kind of glued to our hands. So they're saying that crossing into a new financial frontier that will test how much consumers are willing to pay for a device that's become an indispensable part of modern life. Is it worth $1,000? It's going to depend on the person, but you can make a pretty good case that it absolutely is worth $1,000. So they're saying that in addition to several new features, the souped-up anniversary phone, which again, iPhone X, they're going to call it iPhone 10, X being the Roman numeral for 10, and it will be the anniversary edition because it'll be 10 years of having the iPhone. So also kind of matches up with the Mac OS X, Mac OS 10 that many of you don't use because you're Windows users. But hey, in a lot of ways it makes sense. But they're saying that they could also debut an attention-getting $999 price tag, twice what the original iPhone cost, saying that it would set a new price threshold for any smartphone intended to appeal to the mass market. And hey, why this matters? It matters because $1,000, if you want to compete against Apple, if they have, and it's not like they're making an iPhone, or at least probably not. They're probably using the, the economics of, mass production. But if you want to compete with an iPhone, they aren't just pocketing, X amount of dollars. They're probably going to put in the technology to back it up, or at least be competitive in that space. So what I mean by that is that if you wanted to compete with the iPhone X on the market, you're going to have to spend as much money as Apple to get a comparable phone to the market, at least on a massive scale. Obviously, when you tear it down, the stupid thing costs $300 and it's whatever. But for Samsungs, for the Nokias of the world, for anyone else, if they want to compete with an iPhone X, then they have to spend as much as Apple did. Now, the question is, where this can all fall apart is, of course, will people buy a $1,000 iPhone? Will people spend $1,000 on a smartphone and not just say, the $700 iPhone is plenty enough for me, and I saved $300? Because if they don't buy it, then guess what? You don't even have to compete, and Apple's out a lot of money. But of course, they're testing the waters with an anniversary phone, and then if this works, they're going to bump up probably all their phones to a similar price point and try to get a little extra juice out of them. But with that being said, the article continues on here by saying that the Luxury Good Challenge, saying that wireless carriers are eager to connect with Apple's generally affluent clientele, are likely to either sell the iPhone at a discount or offer appealing subsidies that spread the cost of the device over 2 to 3 years to minimize the sticker shock. We all run into this. You pay an activation fee, and you pay your first month, and you walk out of the store with a $1,000 iPhone, and you only paid $150. It's but you're probably paying more over the term. So that's the question is, and so expect a lot of that. Yes, $1,000, but it's $1,000 unlocked from Apple, much cheaper through the other distributors. And I think people are kind of used to spreading the cost out over the life of their phone, and $1,000, as long as it's justified. In my mind, in the consumer's mind, as long as you get $1,000 worth of technology crammed into your hand, then I'm kind of okay with this. If it's just a new redesign and you don't really get that much more for it, again, these are all details we'll have to find out more so tomorrow during the event, and we'll, of course, talk about it here on Computer America after the event happens. But if it just comes down to a redesign, a better look, a special edition, and that's where the money's going, then I hope this thing would crash and burn. But if they manage to get the technology in there, then I see no reason why people wouldn't be willing to pay more than they do for their laptops or their smartphones. Because I don't know about you folks, but a lot of people that I know, yeah, they definitely use their smartphones more than their average computer. So maybe it's not out of the question to charge more than the average computer. So, all right. With that being said, why don't we go ahead and move on to our next story? And let's see. We have I like this one. So, so far we've seen everything from India to we've seen everything from India to Germany to France to Switzerland to not the United States, but many countries around the world are, maybe Denmark, but yeah, many countries around the world are going to ban traditional fossil fuel cars by a certain date, be it 2040, be it 2050, be it 2028, or whatever the heck some of them are. Well, a new country has just joined the struggle. And this one being one of the bigger ones, as in the biggest one, as in China, aims for an industry-changing ban on fossil fuel cars. Right? Saying that it's not just European countries planning long-term bans on fossil fuel cars, where China's Vice Minister of Industry and IT has revealed that the country's government is developing a timetable for a ban on sales of fossil fuel vehicles. That's big news. They are, China is considered one of the leading problems kind of going into, as their population starts to become more middle class, as their middle class broadens, they're obviously going to want middle class amenities, and that includes cars. And if, 1 billion people, 3 times the population of the United States, all suddenly purchase a car that was fossil fuel burning, that would send fossil fuel prices through the roof because, obviously you just woefully, or not even woefully, but greatly increased the reliance on this. Now, I'm not saying that immediately it's going to have the impact, but it's going to start shifting it towards the idea that electric vehicles are going to be the norm in China rather than fossil fuel cars. At least they're putting a timetable to it, and you can then, kind of work out everything in between. So, by the way, this article comes from Engadget, Mr. John Fingus. So, they're saying that the official hasn't given the official hasn't given a rough estimate for when a ban would kick in, but France and the UK are both aiming for 2040. And it wouldn't be surprising if China aims for a similar time frame, and it's already introducing a cap and trade program that forces companies to buy credits from rivals if their fuel economy and emissions don't fall within certain limits. So cap and trade, obviously, only so much pollution can go out, only so many emissions can go out, and if you're using more than your allotted amount, then you have to pay to, get more. Again, to see China, this is the same country that promised, I think it was like $780 billion in green technology, renewable energy investment over the next 5 years. China's really stepping up when it comes to, grappling with very real and very, personal issues. And I say personal because China is one of the worst in terms of air pollution. Like, they've polluted their cities to an extreme extent. And at the same time, it's kind of awesome to see China say, all right, we have the solutions. We just need to make them happen. Here we go. So as much as, as many problems as China has, at least it's taking steps to alleviate them and not just say, it'll all work out in the end. So they're saying that a ban on the sales that would help the Chinese car market, which is quickly building a reputation for electric vehicles through brands like Geely, which owns Volvo, and BYD, it would encourage foreign companies to collaborate with the Chinese, such as Honda's just announced plans to release a China-specific electric vehicle in 2018. And crucially, banning sales of fossil fuels will cut oil imports, reducing China's dependency on other countries. Not to get political, but yeah, that's one thing about green technology we don't really mention, is that the greener you go, the more solar and wind, you don't really have to import those. Those are just kind of lying around. So yeah, don't have to worry about other countries and what they're doing. And whatever the motivation, the eventual ban is likely to have tremendous effects on the automotive industry, where although China's ratio of car ownership is relatively low, which is about 1 in 5 people, the sheer number of people in the country makes it the largest car market on Earth, with about 300 million vehicles on the road as of 2016. That's a lot of cars. And automakers may have little choice but to switch to EVs if they want to operate in China and compete in the world's biggest brands. And in other words, it likely won't matter what politicians elsewhere believe about the environment. China's shift could dictate a switch to electric vehicles around the world. And I will say, we have another story that kind of loosely ties in. Let's actually switch over there real quick. But Mercedes-Benz, in kind of the same vein, Mercedes-Benz says that they will electrify its entire car lineup by 2022. That's right. And, they're saying the same thing that Volvo, that BMW, that Ford, that many other car companies out there have already said. Volvo, of course, that they've said was no matter what happens, all of their cars by 2022, by 2020, by 2025, whatever it may be, are going to have at least a component of an electric engine. And so this could be hybrid. Gasoline isn't going anywhere, and they know that. But at the same time, there's still going to be at least a portion that's going to run on electricity, which I think is awesome because I forget the statistics, but many people out there day to day only, drive under 50 miles, to and from work, or, just your average driver drives less than 50 miles. So if that electric engine can take you that 50 miles and then the gas can take you even further, it's going to cut emissions by a heck of a lot. So at any rate, between China going fully electric vehicles sometime in the near future, we'll get that date at a later date. And now Mercedes-Benz joining another slew of companies that are, going electric or they're going to go bankrupt. Yeah, this is definitely cool. And again, it has everything to do. This has everything to do with the fact that many countries are going to stop, or not even stop, but outright ban fully fossil fuel burning vehicles. So either adapt or you get left, or you get left behind. So there you have it. And let's see. Oh man, we don't have time for all the stories. Of course, Equifax. We all need to hear about that, but we'll talk more about that tomorrow. All right. One thing that kind of helped ahead of the storm, and yes, this is Tesla, but it raised as many eyebrows as it did, kind of say, yay, Tesla. And it was the idea that you could extend the range on cars to help the owners avoid Hurricane Irma. So for those of you who don't know, there's this thing where when you buy a Tesla, you can either opt in for the 75 kilowatt or the 60 kilowatt, obviously one lower than the other, vehicles. And you pay like $5,000 less. So if you buy the 60 kilowatt hour car, you pay like 35 grand. If you pay for the 75 kilowatt, you pay 40 grand. And if you ever wanted to switch it after the fact, well, you pay them $5,000 and they flip a switch and bam, there you go. They are, and there you go. They are unlocked and you don't have to even go into the shop. It happens remotely and you fully unlock your car's potential. Well, Tesla, ahead of Hurricane Irma, went ahead. That's a bit loud. Here you go. That's about good. So yeah, Hurricane Irma, of course, swept across Florida, and Tesla decided to help all of its consumers by flipping that switch and saying, hey, if you want to get out, you all have the full range of your vehicles. Awesome for them to do, but of course, raised a lot of eyebrows into wondering why they didn't just do that passively. So anyways, don't have time to get into that. Don't have time to get into any of this. Folks, Computer America, music means that we are done. Tune in tomorrow, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern, as we talk with, who do we have on tomorrow? Of course, computer and technology news. And of course, we talk tomorrow to Novatio Solutions So until then, everyone, have a great day. Catch you then. Bye-bye.